Chinese billionaire insults black waiter in public. No one expected his shocking response. He thought money could buy him respect, and that language would keep his secrets safe. But in a city where cultures collide and the past still lingers in every cobblestone, one billionaire's arrogance is about to meet a force even greater than wealth: the dignity of the human spirit. Evenings in Rome have their own particular rhythm, slow and warm, filled with the hush of old secrets and the soft glow of street lamps reflected on cobblestones. On Via della Pace, the world-famous La Fiorentina comes to life as dusk settles over the city. The aroma of truffles and aged wine floats through open windows, blending with laughter and the muted hum of distant traffic. It's the kind of place where the rich and powerful come not just to eat, but to be seen, to negotiate, to celebrate or mourn. Its golden chandelier and frescoed ceilings have borne witness to more dramas than anyone could count. Among the waiters weaving through the tables with effortless grace is Emmanuel Okoye, 28, tall and slender, with gentle eyes and a shy, dignified smile. Emmanuel has worked at La Fiorentina for almost 4 years, ever since he arrived in Italy from Lagos, back home. He was a student of languages, dreaming of becoming a translator. But life had different plans. Now, every day, he steps into the elegant world of La Fiorentina, where his quiet work ethic and genuine kindness set him apart, even if many guests barely see him. To most of the clientele, Emmanuel is almost invisible. They see the crisp white shirt, the polished shoes, the smooth delivery of wine and antipasto. But a few notice the way he listens, how he remembers the little things: a favorite dish, a birthday, a particular table by the window. The older regulars, especially Signora Rossi, often greet him like an old friend. "Brazi, Emmanuel," she says, with a warmth that reminds him of his mother. For Emmanuel, these small moments of connection make the job bearable, even on difficult nights. Yet beneath the surface, Rome is a city of contrasts. For every embrace, there are 100 stares, whispers, reminders that he is an outsider. Emmanuel tries to focus on his work, ignoring the comments he sometimes hears in the kitchen or on the streets about his skin, his accent, his foreignness. He keeps his head high, moving through each shift with steady dignity. Italy, for all its beauty, can be a hard place for those who do not look or sound like everyone else. On this particular evening, the restaurant buzzes with anticipation. The owner, Signor Bellini, has spent the whole afternoon overseeing the setup, instructing the staff to be on their best behavior. "A very important guest tonight," he announced. "Make sure everything is perfect." Emmanuel, always meticulous, checks every table twice, ensuring that each fork gleams and every glass stands precisely where it should. He suspects tonight will be challenging, but he does not yet know why. Shortly after 8, a sleek black Mercedes pulls up to the curb. Cameras flash as the door opens and Victor Leon steps out. Victor is a billionaire many times over, famous not only in China but across the world, a tech entrepreneur who rose from poverty to command an empire of apps, devices, and investments. He is tall, well-dressed, with an air of effortless superiority. His eyes scan the restaurant, taking in the marble floors and velvet curtains with a single, calculating glance. Victor is not alone. He is accompanied by his entourage, 2 sharply dressed assistants, a translator, and a pair of Italian business partners. Together, they sweep into the restaurant, causing a ripple of excitement. Phones discreetly appear at nearby tables. Whispers fly among the staff. "That's Victor Leon. The Victor Leon." Emmanuel feels the shift in atmosphere, the way people stand straighter, the sudden tension in the air. The maitre d', nervous but eager to please, leads Victor and his party to the finest table, close to a window with a view of the city lights. "Welcome, Mr. Leon. We are honored to have you," he says in careful English. Victor only nods, barely acknowledging the gesture, then begins speaking rapidly in Mandarin to his assistants. The translator relays instructions, requesting specific dishes and vintage wines. Emmanuel, assigned to their table, waits patiently, pad and pen ready. Victor barely glances at Emmanuel as he orders, making no attempt at pleasantries. Instead, he talks over him, discussing business in Mandarin, making jokes that only his inner circle understands. Emmanuel, who speaks 5 languages but rarely reveals this, listens silently, catching the meaning of words that Victor assumes are private. It's a small secret he keeps to himself, a reminder that he is more than what people see. The meal begins, each course more extravagant than the last. Emmanuel moves quietly between tables, serving wine, refilling water, clearing plates. Victor's mood seems to improve as the wine flows, and soon his laughter fills the room. He becomes louder, more animated, telling stories of deals made and rivals defeated. Emmanuel notices the looks exchanged among Victor's party: admiration, envy, fear, money, and Victor's world is the only thing that matters. In a rare moment, Victor turns his attention to Emmanuel. What's your name?" he asks abruptly, not in Italian, but in English. Emmanuel answers softly, "My name is Emmanuel, sir." Victor smirks, then turns to his table. "You see, even here, they come from all over the world. Everyone wants a piece of Italy." His companions laugh, but the joke is not for Emmanuel's benefit. As the evening progresses, Victor becomes more brazen. He asks Emmanuel strange questions. "Do you like working here? How much do you make? Do you ever think about going back home?" Each question is a little test, a way to assert dominance. Emmanuel answers politely, never betraying emotion, but inside, he feels a familiar knot tightening, and ache he's learned to hide. Across the room, Signora Rossi watches the scene unfold. She knows Emmanuel's story, how hard he works, how much he sends home each month to his family in Nigeria. She senses the undercurrent of tension, the way Victor's words sting even though they're wrapped in humor. She makes a mental note to leave an extra tip tonight. Victor, sensing the attention he commands, leans back in his chair and addresses Emmanuel one last time. This time, he switches to Mandarin, assuming no one else will understand. "People like you are lucky to be here," he says with a smirk. "But no matter how hard you work, you'll always be just a servant." The translator doesn't bother to interpret. He assumes it's just another private joke. Emmanuel stands for a moment, letting the words wash over him. He feels the sting, but also something else, a quiet resolve. He glances at Victor, then at the city lights outside the window. The world, he knows, is not always fair, but in this moment, surrounded by laughter and luxury, Emmanuel decides he will not let Victor's words define him. The rest of the night passes in a blur of orders and laughter, but the words linger in Emmanuel's mind. He finishes his shift, collects his tips, and steps out into the Roman night, the city alive with possibility and pain. He knows tomorrow will bring new challenges, new faces, new stories, but for now, he walks the ancient streets with his head held high, determined to write his own ending. After midnight, the streets of Rome quiet down, but inside La Fiorentina, the staff moved with practiced precision, clearing away the last glasses and resetting tables for the next day. Emmanuel finds solace in this quiet labor. The clink of porcelain, the soft brush of linen, the faint music that never quite fades from the air, all these things bring a sense of routine and order, a reminder that life goes on no matter what is said or done. As Emmanuel polishes the last wine glass, his mind drifts back to his first weeks in Italy. He remembers standing at the edge of Termini Station, suitcase in hand, overwhelmed by the size and chaos of the city. Back then, everything was new and uncertain. He spoke halting Italian and lived in a cramped apartment with 4 other immigrants, each with their own story of hardship and hope. Those early days were hard, but also filled with a strange sense of possibility. Over time, Emmanuel learned how to navigate Rome's labyrinth of streets and unspoken rules. He studied Italian late into the night, memorizing verbs and phrases, practicing with old movies and friendly customers. He picked up bits of other languages too: French, Spanish, a little German, and, To his own surprise, he found himself remembering Mandarin from his university days, a language he never thought would serve him here. Every day brought new challenges. Sometimes, it was a customer who snapped his fingers for service, or another who left without tipping, pretending not to see him. Sometimes, it was the bureaucracy, the endless forms, the cold indifference of officials. But Emmanuel persevered. "My life is not theirs to judge," he would tell himself, echoing his mother's voice. "Dignity is something no one can take from you, unless you let them." In the heart of Rome, Emmanuel built his own small world. He found friends in unexpected places, a baker who let him buy yesterday's bread for half price, a Senegalese street vendor who shared stories of Dakar, a Romanian dishwasher with a talent for opera. In their shared struggles, he found strength. Together, they created a tapestry of belonging, even in a city that sometimes felt cold. Back at La Fiorentina, the regulars became part of Emmanuel's world. He learned their preferences, their moods, the stories that mattered to them. There was the couple from Milan who came every anniversary, the professor who always ordered tiramisu, the tired mother who found a moment's peace with her espresso. Each interaction, however brief, was a chance for connection, a reminder that people are more than their first impressions. Tonight, as he clears Victor's table, Emmanuel's hands are steady. He feels the weight of the billionaire's gaze, the amusement in his voice, but he refuses to be rattled. Instead, he focuses on the details, the precise way a wine bottle should be held, the respectful distance to keep from the guests, the subtle cues of body language. These are skills honed over years, invisible but essential. Victor, meanwhile, is restless. He checks his phone between courses, sends curt messages in Mandarin, and grows impatient when dishes take more than a few minutes to arrive. His assistants scramble to anticipate his needs, offering updates on his portfolio, reminders of meetings in Shanghai and New York. Victor barely acknowledges the world beyond his inner circle, lost in the calculations of power and profit. For Victor, success has always been a matter of control. He prides himself on being the smartest person in the room, the one who sees patterns others miss. In his youth, he clawed his way out of poverty, working through endless nights, teaching himself English, German, even a little Italian. Now, with every deal and every acquisition, he measures his worth in numbers, a fortune so vast it is almost abstract. Yet there are moments when Victor feels a flicker of doubt, a memory of leaner times, of nights spent hungry and afraid. He buries these memories under layers of luxury, designer suits, rare wines, exclusive company. Still, something about tonight unsettles him. Maybe it's the city, with its ancient stones and restless ghosts. Maybe it's the way the waiter moves, so quiet, so composed, refusing to shrink from his gaze. The evening continues, and Victor's mood shifts from amusement to irritation. He complains about the olive oil, grumbles about the temperature of the wine, and asks for the check with a snap of his fingers. His companions, used to these moods, try to keep the conversation light. But Emmanuel, standing at a respectful distance, notices the growing tension at the table. As Victor prepares to leave, he offers one final, dismissive comment in Mandarin, intended only for his companions. No matter where you go, there will always be those who serve and those who are served. It's just the order of things. The translator, sensing the mood, says nothing. For Emmanuel, the words sting, but they also spark something deeper, a sense of quiet pride. He remembers his father's lessons, spoken long ago beneath the mango trees of Lagos. Work is not shameful, my son, it is a way to honor yourself and your family. Emmanuel stands a little straighter, reminding himself that his worth is not defined by someone else's ignorance. As the billionaire's party gathers their things and heads for the door, a brief hush falls over the restaurant. Emmanuel catches the eye of Signora Rossi, who gives him a small, encouraging nod. It's enough. The night is nearly over, but tomorrow will bring another chance to prove himself, to build something better, to reclaim a little more of the dream that brought him here. Out in the street, Victor's Mercedes glides away, taillights fading into the Roman night. Inside, Emmanuel wipes down the last table and counts his tips, thinking of home, of the siblings waiting for his call, of the mother who prays for his safety every day. He gathers his things, says goodnight to his colleagues, and steps out into the cool air. Rome after midnight is a different city, quieter, more mysterious, shadows stretching across the old stones. Emmanuel walks the familiar route to his apartment, passing shuttered shops and silent fountains. He breathes in the scent of jasmine and exhaust, the pulse of the city thrumming beneath his feet. On nights like this, Emmanuel allows himself to dream. He pictures a future where he can finish his studies, perhaps open a small business, maybe even bring his family to Italy. He dreams of a world where respect is not a luxury, but a birthright, where language is a bridge, not a barrier. These drinks keep him moving forward, even when the world feels unkind. Before sleep, Emmanuel writes a brief message to his mother, all is well. Work was busy tonight. I miss you. He knows she will wake to his words, her heart a little lighter for the news. Across continents and oceans, the thread of family holds strong, binding them together even in distance. Meanwhile, at a penthouse overlooking the city, Victor Liang pours himself a glass of cognac and gazes out at the skyline. The deals, the money, the applause, it all seems a little less satisfying tonight. For a moment, he remembers the look in the waiter's eyes, not anger, not fear, but something else, dignity, perhaps, or the quiet certainty of a man who knows his own worth. Victor shakes his head, dismissing the thought. In his world, such things rarely matter. But in the hush of his luxurious suite, Victor finds sleep elusive. He paces the room, replaying the evening in his mind, searching for the source of his unease. Was it the city itself, with its ancient wisdom and secret scars? Or was it the knowledge that, no matter how far he has come, there are some things money cannot buy: respect, understanding, forgiveness? As dawn approaches, the city stirs back to life. In a small apartment on the outskirts, Emmanuel wakes to sunlight streaming through the window. He stretches, grateful for another day, and prepares for the morning rush. There will be challenges. Yes, there will be moments of doubt and frustration, but there will also be kindness, laughter, and the quiet victories of ordinary life. He dresses carefully, tucking in his shirt, tying his apron just so. He steps out into the morning, greeting neighbors in Italian and English, sharing a smile with the baker, a nod with the old man on the corner. In these small exchanges, he finds community, a sense of belonging that money cannot purchase. At La Fiorentina, preparations for the new day began. The kitchen staff arrived with fresh produce. The maids polish silverware. The maitre d' reviews reservations. Emmanuel moves among them, a steady presence, respected by those who have come to know him. He is not just a waiter, but a part of the life of the place, a bridge between cultures, a witness to countless stories. And somewhere in the city, a billionaire prepares for another day of business, his mind already on the next deal, the next conquest. Yet, for just a moment, the memory of a quiet, dignified waiter lingers, an echo of a lesson learned, or perhaps one still waiting to be understood. The next evening at La Fiorentina began much like any other, with the city of Rome glowing gold beneath the setting sun. For Emmanuel, it was another shift, another night of carefully orchestrated elegance. He arrived early, as he always did, pausing for a moment outside the kitchen door to draw a long, coming breath. Inside, the familiar sounds of preparation filled the air, the clang of pans, the hiss of onions, the crisp orders barked in Italian. Emmanuel exchanged a few words with the chef, tied his apron, and checked the night's reservation list. The name Victor Leon was there, circled twice in red ink. Rumors had spread among the staff. The billionaire was returning, this time for a private celebration with a group of investors and international guests. The kitchen buzzed with nervous energy. Even Senior Bellini paced the dining room, inspecting every detail with a critical eye. "Tonight, we must be perfect," he instructed, not just to Emmanuel, but to everyone. The waitstaff nodded obediently, aware of mistakes. It was not every day that such powerful men gathered under one roof. As the hour of Victor's arrival approached, the restaurant filled with the scent of garlic and rosemary. Candlelight flickered along the marble walls. Emmanuel moved from table to table, attentive but reserved, his mind half on his work, half on the memory of the previous night. Victor's words in Mandarin still echoed in his mind, stinging like an old bruise. He reminded himself to focus, to treat this as just another evening, another customer. Just after 8, the black Mercedes reappeared outside. Paparazzi gathered by the curb, their cameras ready. Victor Liam swept in, this time flanked not just by assistants, but by high-profile guests, a Saudi investor in a crisp white thobe, a French venture capitalist with sharp cheekbones, and several Italian business elites. The atmosphere shifted at once, the conversations dimmed, every at turning to the entourage as they made their entrance. Victor was in a lively mood, shaking hands, laughing, issuing compliments in English, Italian, and Mandarin. He seemed determined to charm, yet there was still an undercurrent of arrogance to his every gesture. He glanced around, nodding with approval at the decor, then found his table set beneath a grand fresco depicting the triumph of Caesar. Emmanuel was assigned to serve them once again. Victor greeted Emmanuel with a quick, almost dismissive nod, as if last night's exchange had never happened. But Emmanuel saw the faint glimmer of recognition in the billionaire's eyes, the awareness that he had spoken freely, believing his words had gone unheard. Tonight, Victor seemed emboldened by his audience, hungry for admiration and laughs. The first course was served, burrito with heirloom tomatoes, drizzled in olive oil. Emmanuel poured wine, attentive as always. The table was a world of languages and egos. Victor regaled his guests with stories of Silicon Valley, of cutting-edge technology, and of fortunes made and lost in a single day. His words dripped with casual confidence, his laughter a little too loud, as if performing for an invisible stage. At one point, Victor began joking about cultural misunderstandings in business. "You know, sometimes you have to repeat yourself 100 times for some people to get it," he said, grinning as his guests chuckled, especially when the staff comes from all over. He gestured vaguely in Emmanuel's direction, earning a ripple of laughter from those who understood the implication. Emmanuel felt the sting but kept his composure, focusing on the task at hand. The French investor, perhaps sensing a line had been crossed, tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. "Rome is a city of history," she said brightly, "and of reinvention." Victor, however, was not ready to let go. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, and addressed Emmanuel directly in English. "Tell me, what brought you here? Surely not the weather?" His tone was teasing, but the question carried an edge. For a moment, the table fell silent, every eye on Emmanuel. He answered simply, "I came for opportunity, sir. Rome has a way of drawing people in." He smiled politely, refusing to be flustered. But Victor pressed further. "Opportunity, yes, but it must be hard." "Yes, to serve others, every day, back home. Did you dream of this?" His words hovered on the border of mockery and curiosity. Emmanuel's cheeks burned, but he held his ground. "In every country, work is work, sir. We all have dreams. And sometimes, we do what we must for family." The Saudi investor nodded approvingly, but Victor only shrugged, dismissing the response. Spoken like a philosopher, he said, and the table laughed again. The meal progressed. Each course became a stage for Victor's theatrics. He criticized the pasta, joked about the wine, even asked the Italian guest if Rome could ever compete with Shanghai's modern skyline. Emmanuel continued his duties with grace, refusing to let the Japs distract him. Yet, beneath the surface, the tension built, an unspoken battle of dignity versus ego. After the main course, Victor decided to show off his own language skills. "Let's see how global we are tonight," he declared. He greeted each guest in a native tongue, switching between English, French, Arabic, and Mandarin. When he reached Emmanuel, he smirked, then muttered a sentence in rapid Mandarin, assuming no one else would understand. "Some people are born to serve, no matter where they go." This time, the translator laughed, repeating the words in English for the table. He says, "Some people are just born to serve. It's fate, isn't it?" The table erupted in laughter, some awkward, some genuine. Emmanuel felt every eye on him, the moment stretching, thick with humiliation. Victor sat back, satisfied with his little performance. He poured himself another glass of wine, oblivious to the discomfort in the air. Emmanuel finished pouring for the rest of the guests. His hands steady, his jaw clenched. For a moment, he considered walking away. He thought of his mother, his family, the sacrifices that had brought him here. Then, as if on instinct, Emmanuel looked up and met Victor's gaze directly. "Excuse me, sir," he said in flawless Mandarin, his voice calm but clear. "But perhaps you should remember that every person's story is longer than you imagine. Even those who serve may surprise you." For a split second, time seemed to stop. The table froze, forks and knives suspended midair. The translator's eyes widened in shock. Victor's smirk faltered, replaced by a look of pure disbelief. The room, so recently filled with laughter, went silent as the weight of Emmanuel's words settled over them. The Saudi investor was the first to break the silence, clapping his hands in delight. "Bravo!" he exclaimed, switching to English. "Well said." The French guest offered a soft smile, murmuring, "Magnifique." Even the Italian businessman, who had followed the exchange with curiosity, nodded in approval. Victor, stone, tried to recover his composure. "Impressive," he managed in Mandarin, forcing a smile. "You speak well," but the confidence in his voice was gone. The power dynamic had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. For once, Victor found himself the object of scrutiny, his arrogance exposed before the entire table. Emmanuel, now the center of attention, offered a slight bow. "Thank you, sir. In my country, we are taught that respect is given, not demanded." He shifted smoothly back to English. "Is there anything else I can bring for the table?" The night after his bold stand at Victor's table, Emmanuel felt both lighter and strangely exposed. News of his response in Mandarin had traveled quickly among the staff at La Fiorentina. Some applauded him in private, offering supportive glances or an encouraging clap on the shoulder. Others whispered in nervous tones, unsure what it would mean for their jobs if the billionaire took offense. For Emmanuel, the encounter was a blur, pride and fear twisting together inside him as he replayed the words in his mind. Victor Liang did not return the next evening, but his shadow lingered in the restaurant like a stain. The maitre d' asked Emmanuel to stay out of sight during certain VIP dinners, just in case, and Senior Bellini pulled him aside to offer a cautious warning. "You must be careful," the Omer said in a low voice. "Powerful men remember slights. We all need this job." Emmanuel nodded, understanding the pressure but unwilling to regret defending his dignity. Still, the anxiety followed him home, settling in the pit of his stomach as he prepared for sleep. He messaged his mother that night, explaining only that work had been difficult, omitting the details. "Remember who you are," she replied almost instantly, as if sensing his turmoil. "You are my son, and you stand tall wherever you go." Her words soothed him, and Emmanuel drifted into uneasy dreams, haunted by faces at candlelit tables and laughter that echoed like thunder. Days passed, and the rhythm of the restaurant resumed its familiar pace. Tourists came and went, the Roman sun rising and setting over the Tiber. Emmanuel lost himself in his work, grateful for the distraction, yet each time a new reservation appeared on the list, his heart skipped with the fear that Victor would reappear, this time with revenge, or some subtle act of sabotage. The other staff noticed a change in him. Marta, a young waitress from Albania, whispered to him one afternoon as they polished glasses in the back. "You did the right thing," she said. "Some people, they never hear the truth. But you were brave." Her kindness gave him strength, and for the first time since the incident, Emmanuel allowed himself a cautious smile. But rumors swirled. There was talk that Victor had complained about unprofessional service in a scathing review to the owner. Though no one could confirm if it was true, the fear of retribution hung over the staff, infecting their moods. The regulars, Signora Rossi, the professor, the old couple from Milan, noticed a tension but did not know its source. One evening, as Emmanuel was clearing the last plates from a quiet table in the corner, Signora Rossi beckoned him over. She spoke in gentle, accented English, her eyes wise and kind. "You remind me of my own son, Emmanuel," she said softly. "He, too, faced those who would make him feel small. But he learned, sometimes, silence is not golden. Sometimes, it is a chain." She pressed a folded note into his hand. Inside was a quote, handwritten in careful script. "He who is brave is free." That night, Emmanuel walked home through the moonlit streets of Trastevere, the note clutched tight in his hand. He thought of the generations of people who had walked these stones, Romans, immigrants, poets, and workers, all searching for a place in the city's grand story. The night air was cool, carrying the distant sound of music and laughter. For a moment, Emmanuel felt a part of something larger than himself. But not all his encounters were kind. The next afternoon, a group of young men loitered near the restaurant's entrance, mocking him in a mix of Italian and broken English. "Go back where you came from," one of them sneered, blocking his path. Emmanuel said nothing, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. He slipped past, his dignity unbroken but his spirit bruised. In that moment, he understood the silent, daily battles that so many immigrants fought, not just for a living, but for respect. Inside the kitchen, the chef grumbled about supply shortages and rising prices. But when Emmanuel appeared, he nodded in silent solidarity. "You work hard," the chef muttered, "slicing onions with practiced ease. That's what matters here." Even the dishwasher, a stoic Moldovan named Pavel, offered a rare thumbs up, his expression softening for a split second. Emmanuel realized then that his act of speaking up had changed not only his own standing but had subtly shifted the balance in the restaurant. The staff watched him with new respect. Marta stood up straighter. The busboys exchanged fewer nervous glances. Even Senior Bellini, worried as he was, began to treat Emmanuel less as a shadow and more as a man with a story. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled across the city, a woman arrived at the restaurant asking for Emmanuel by name. She introduced herself as Julia Chin, a reporter for an international news outlet based in Rome. "I heard something interesting happened here last week," she said, her tone both curious and kind. Emmanuel hesitated, wary of publicity, but Julia reassured him. Stories matter, especially for those who don't always have a voice. Over coffee in a quiet corner, Emmanuel shared his story, carefully omitting details that might endanger his job or his colleagues. Julia listened intently, taking notes, her questions gentle and respectful. "What would you say to others who feel invisible?" she asked. Emmanuel thought for a moment, then answered, "We are only invisible when we let ourselves be. Dignity is not a gift, it's a choice. Every day." Julia thanked him, promising to tell his story with care. As she left, Emmanuel felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps his words would travel beyond the gilded walls of La Fiorentina, reaching someone who needed to hear them. Yet, with hope came fear. What would Victor think if the story got out? Will he use his influence to make trouble for Emmanuel or the restaurant? That night, As rain lashed the city and thunder rattled the windows, Emmanuel sat at his small table, staring at the note from Signora Rossi. "He who is brave is free." He repeated the words like a prayer, wondering what freedom really meant for someone like him. Was it simply surviving in a foreign land? Or was it daring to stand tall? To claim a place at the table, no matter how many times you were told to move aside? It was Friday night, and Rome buzzed with anticipation. The weather was electric, a storm threatening in the distance, the sky alive with quicksilver flashes. Inside La Fiorentina, the tension matched the storm outside. 4 days, the staff had whispered about the rumor Victor Liang was returning, this time hosting a gala for international tech leaders and politicians. Security was tighter than usual, and Senior Bellini's nervousness was palpable. Emmanuel felt it in his bones. Something was coming, and it would not be like any night before. The main dining room was transformed, glistening white tablecloths, new flower arrangements, a grand piano playing soft jazz near the entrance. The kitchen moved with military precision, every chef and server aware that tonight's performance could shape the restaurant's fate. Emmanuel, as always, was early. He dressed in silence, straightening his collar, staring at his own reflection, a reminder that no matter what happened, he would face it with dignity. Victor's arrival was as grand as ever. Black cars lined the street, and guests spilled out in designer suits and shimmer dresses. Cameras flashed. Reporters craned for a glimpse of the billionaire and his influential guests. Victor moved through the crowd like a general, his charisma magnetic but cold, commanding attention with a single gesture. His eyes swept the room and settled briefly, almost imperceptibly, on Emmanuel. As the night unfolded, the air inside grew heavier. The guests drank and laughed, swapping stories of investments and political intrigue. The music grew louder, but beneath the surface, small dramas played out: a spilled glass of wine, a heated argument at the bar, glances exchanged between rivals. Emmanuel drifted from table to table, delivering wine and entrees, his movements smooth but his mind alert to every detail. Halfway through the evening, Victor called for silence and rose to give a speech. His words soared, painting pictures of progress and innovation. Hinting at grand plans for European investment, he charmed his audience, switching languages with ease, quoting Italian poetry and making jokes in Mandarin. The room laughed, applauded, drank to his health, but beneath the praise, there was something sharper, an edge to Victor's tone, a sense that he was not simply a guest, but a conqueror. When the applause faded, Victor raised his glass, inviting the staff to join the celebration. "Let us toast not just to business, but to those who serve," he said, his eyes locking on Emmanuel. "For in every great enterprise, there are those who lead, and those who make it possible." The guests, emboldened by the wine, cheered and lifted their glasses. Emmanuel nodded politely, refusing to let his expression betray his discomfort. But Victor was not finished. He motioned Emmanuel closer. "Come, join us," he said, switching to English for the crowd. "Tell us, what is it like to work here among the rich and powerful? To serve at the table of kings?" There was laughter, some forced, some genuine. The spotlight was blinding. Emmanuel hesitated, then approached, steadying his breath. Victor's smile widened. "Perhaps, for our entertainment, you can say a few words in Mandarin?" The room erupted in surprised murmurs, some guests exchanging uncertain looks. Emmanuel glanced around. He saw Signora Rossi, her face tense with worry. Marta, her hands clasped tightly in her apron. The chef, watching from the kitchen door. He realized he stood not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel small. He looked Victor in the eye and began to speak in flawless Mandarin, his voice calm and clear, each word landing like a pebble in a still pond. "In my country, we say, he who respects others will be respected. He who belittles others only shrinks himself." A hush fell over the room, The translator, caught off guard, hesitated, then rendered the words in English for the crowd. Emmanuel continued, switching back to English for all to hear. To serve is not to be less. In every place I have worked, every table I have set, I have seen humanity, its pride, its hunger, its kindness, and sometimes its cruelty. I do my job with honor, as my parents taught me, and as I hope to teach my children one day. His voice grew stronger. True greatness is not found in how many serve you, but in how you treat those who do. There was a moment of perfect, echoing silence. Then, one by one, guests began to applaud. The French investors stood, leading the applause. The Saudi guest nodded gravely. Even the Italian politicians, usually so aloof, joined in, recognizing the moment for what it was, a challenge, a statement, a truth that could not be ignored. Victor, caught off guard, attempted a chuckle. Well spoken, he said, but the words rang hollow. The attention had shifted. Emmanuel was no longer just a waiter. He was a man who had spoken truth to power, whose words had pierced the armor of wealth and status. The applause swelled, filling the grand hall, and Victor found himself, for the first time in memory, on the outside looking in. For Emmanuel, the noise blurred into a kind of music. He felt taller, lighter, as if a great weight had fallen from his shoulders. He caught Marta's eye, and she smiled, tears brightening her gaze. Even Senior Bellini, so anxious at the start of the night, grinned and gave Emmanuel a small, grateful nod. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Guests came to shake Emmanuel's hand, to thank him, to share their own stories of migration and struggle. The staff rallied around him, pride replacing fear. The restaurant itself seemed changed, warmer, brighter, more alive. When the last guests departed and the storm finally broke outside, thunder rolling through the ancient streets, Emmanuel stepped into the cool night air. The city seemed to glow just for him, each raindrop a promise. He looked up at the dark sky, feeling the future open before him, vast and uncertain, but filled, at last, with hope. The rain that swept through Rome that night washed away more than just the dust on the cobblestones. It carried with it the last echoes of the storm inside La Fiorentina, a storm of words, pride, and truth. By dawn, the city was bathed in soft gold, and the tension that had long haunted the restaurant had begun to ebb. For Emmanuel, the new day felt like a rebirth. He rose early, stepping onto his small balcony to breathe the cool morning air, feeling as if the world itself was cleaner, quieter, gentler than before. Word of what had happened at the gala traveled quickly. By noon, staff at La Fiorentina were buzzing with excitement, pride, and a touch of disbelief. For once, the story was not about Victor Leon or his money, but about the quiet waiter from Nigeria who had stood tall in the face of power. Marta greeted Emmanuel at the door with a broad smile and a warm hug. "You are amazing," she whispered. Even the kitchen staff, often gruff and indifferent, offered nods and approving claps on the back. Senior Bellini called Emmanuel into his office that morning. The owner's face was a mixture of relief and awe. "You did something I never could have done," he said quietly, pouring Emmanuel a small glass of espresso. "You spoke not just for yourself, but for all of us. I am grateful and proud to have you on my team." Emmanuel, touched by the words, could only nod. It was the first time he truly felt he belonged. The atmosphere in the restaurant changed almost overnight. Guests began to look at Emmanuel differently, not as a shadow passing between tables, but as a man with a story. Some regulars made a point to thank him, to ask after his family, to share their own tales of migration and struggle. Even the tourists, who had heard rumors of the night the waiter spoke out, arrived with curiosity and respect. For the first time in years, Emmanuel found joy not just in his work, but in the people it brought into his life. Yet, not all reactions were kind. There were a few who muttered that he had overstepped, or that a waiter should know his place. Emmanuel met their gazes with calm and a hint of sadness, understanding that true change always meets resistance. He did not argue or defend himself. The truth of what he had said needed no explanation. The world would move at its own pace. But he had found his footing. Victor Leon, meanwhile, was uncharacteristically silent. He left Rome the morning after the gala, his entourage subdued and distant. No one at La Fiorentina knew what he thought of the night's events, whether he was angry, embarrassed, or moved in some hidden way. Emmanuel wondered if Victor would ever see him as more than a servant, or if the billionaire's world would always remain closed, walled off by pride. Yet, as the days passed and no repercussions came, Emmanuel felt his fear gradually dissolve, replaced by a quiet, satisfying peace. A few days later, Julia Chen's article appeared online and in the international press. It was titled, "Dignity on the Menu, a waiter's stand-in long echoes far beyond." The piece was careful, balanced, and powerful. Julia described not only the confrontation, but the journey that brought Emmanuel from Lagos to Rome, the friendships he forged, and the silent courage required to claim his voice. Within hours, messages poured in from around the world, old friends from Nigeria, strangers who recognized themselves in his story, and even distant relatives who had once doubted his choices. At home, Emmanuel read the article over and over, his heart swelling with pride and disbelief. His mother called that night, voice thick with emotion, "You have made us proud. My son, the world is seeing what I have always known. You are strong. You are kind. You are worthy." Tears ran down Emmanuel's cheeks as he listened, gratitude rising in his chest like a prayer. In that moment, the miles between Rome and Lagos seemed to vanish. The days that followed were filled with small but profound changes. Emmanuel noticed little things: a fellow waiter asking for help with his Italian homework, a busboy confiding in him about troubles at home, Signora Rossi leaving an extra slice of cake for strength. He was invited to staff dinners, asked to teach a few phrases in Mandarin to curious coworkers, trusted to train new hires. Slowly, his world grew larger and warmer, stitched together by acts of kindness both given and received. One quiet afternoon, as the sun poured through the restaurant windows, Signora Rossi lingered over her espresso. She beckoned Emmanuel and patted his hand. "You remind us that courage is not always loud," she said, her eyes shining. "Sometimes, it is steady and gentle, like a river shaping stone." Emmanuel smiled, humbled by her words. For the first time, he believed them. Despite the newfound respect, Emmanuel did not allow pride to harden his heart. He continued to treat each guest, kind or cruel, with the same careful dignity. He remembered the words from his father, "Work is not a shame. It is the bridge between hope and tomorrow." He carried this lesson with him, quietly teaching it to others, not with speeches but with steady hands and a listening heart. Occasionally, he thought of Victor Leon, sometimes with anger, sometimes with pity, but more often with gratitude. It was Victor's arrogance that had pushed Emmanuel to speak, to claim his story in front of strangers. In some odd, poetic way, the billionaire had helped Emmanuel become more than he ever intended. One evening, weeks later, a letter arrived from Shanghai. There was no return address, just a brief, handwritten note in Mandarin. "Sometimes we learn from those we least expect. Thank you for reminding me what respect means. VL." Emmanuel read it twice, then tucked it away in the drawer beside Signora Rossi's quote. The letter did not erase the past, but it softened it. It was a small gesture, but it mattered. With the passing of time, Emmanuel's story faded from the headlines, but not from the hearts of those it touched. At La Fiorentina, he became more than a waiter. He was a quiet leader, a keeper of hope, a bridge between worlds. He resumed his studies, saved money for his family, and dreamed of one day opening a restaurant of his own, a place where every guest, from the humblest to the richest, would feel seen and valued. And so, life returned to its rhythm. Rome spun on, ancient and eternal. The rains came and went, tourists flooded the piazzas. Lovers walked by the river. Children chased pigeons through the square. Emmanuel continued to walk his path with quiet dignity, knowing that courage, once claimed, could never truly be taken away. Seasons shifted quietly in Rome. Spring gave way to summer, and with it, the city glowed in long evenings scented with jasmine and anticipation. The events at La Fiorentina had faded from the city's gossip, yet their significance remained etched into the hearts of those who witnessed them. For Emmanuel, life was no longer merely a series of shifts and careful silences. It was richer, heavier with meaning, and illuminated by a sense of belonging he had once thought unreachable. The restaurant flourished in the months that followed. There were new faces among the staff, students, travelers, dreamers from every corner of the world. Emmanuel found himself gently mentoring them, offering encouragement and advice, often in several languages. Be patient, you would tell the nervous new hires, and listen with your heart. People remember how you make them feel. His words, once practiced in solitude, now echoed in the voices of those he helped. At home, Emmanuel's life grew more vibrant as well. His circle of friends expanded, bringing laughter and warmth into his modest apartment. On Sundays, the aroma of jollof rice and pasta mingled in the kitchen as neighbors gathered to share stories and food. The boundaries between home and host country blurred, replaced by something new. Community built not by blood, but by shared hope and struggle. His studies resumed in earnest. In the quiet hours after work, Emmanuel pored over textbooks, practicing translation exercises, determined to reclaim the dreams he had set aside. With the encouragement of Giulia Chen and the support of Senior Bellini, he enrolled in a local university's language program. The classroom became a second home, a place where his questions were welcomed and his insights respected. He was, at last, both student and teacher. Letters arrived from Legos more often now, sometimes bearing good news, sometimes sorrow, but always love. Emmanuel sent money and stories in return, photos of Roman ruins, audio messages in which his siblings delighted at his attempts to teach them Italian. His mother's voice remained his anchor. Steady as a lighthouse, your story is ours, she reminded him. You carry all of us, and we are proud. Occasionally, Emmanuel would walk past the grand hotels and glass towers where men like Victor Leon did business. He thought less often of the billionaire now, but when he did, it was without bitterness. That night at La Fiorentina had transformed them both, in ways neither could have predicted. For Victor, perhaps, it was a lesson in humility. For Emmanuel, an affirmation of his own quiet strength. The world did not change overnight, but hearts could change, and sometimes that was enough. The letter from Shanghai remained tucked away in Emmanuel's desk, a private reminder that even the most powerful can be moved. Once self-doubt crept in, as it sometimes did, he would read Victor's words and remember that courage is contagious. Small acts can ripple outward, changing the lives of strangers far beyond our knowing. La Fiorentina, too, evolved. The restaurant became known not only for its food, but for its spirit. Guests from around the world sought it out, drawn by rumors of a place where dignity was served alongside wine. The staff wore the diversity like a badge of honor. There were new stories every night, of reunions, proposals, reconciliations, woven together by a shared commitment to kindness. Senior Bellini, more relaxed now, would often raise his glass in a quiet toast to Emmanuel, pride shining in his eyes. Giulia Chen's article lived a life of its own, cited in university lectures and reposted on social media. Every so often, a guest would arrive with a printout, asking for an autograph or a quiet word. Emmanuel never grew comfortable with fame, but he welcomed the chance to listen, to offer a reassuring nod or a piece of advice. For those who felt unseen, he became a beacon, a reminder that they, too, belonged. In the months that followed, Emmanuel took a bold step. With the help of his friends and the blessing of Signor Bellini, he began organizing language exchange nights at La Fiorentina. On Wednesday evenings, the restaurant buzzed with voices in Italian, English, Mandarin, Yoruba, and French. Immigrants and locals alike came together, sharing food, laughter, and lessons in communication. What began as a small experiment soon became a cherished tradition. On the anniversary of that unforgettable night, the staff gathered for a private dinner. The old fears and anxieties had faded, replaced by trust and respect. Marta stood to give a toast. "To courage," she said, "lifting your glass, to our friend Emmanuel, who showed us all that dignity is not a luxury, but a right." The room filled with applause and laughter. And for a moment, Emmanuel allowed himself to believe that he had truly come home. Late that evening, after the last song faded and the staff drifted away, Emmanuel lingered alone in the quiet dining room. He walked to the window overlooking the piazza, watching as Rome's nightlife unfolded, a patchwork of dreams and stories still being written. He remembered the fear that had once gripped him, the nights when the world seemed indifferent, even hostile. Now, standing in the gentle glow of the city lights, he felt only gratitude. He pulled the old letter and Signora Rossi's quote from his pocket, reading them side by side. Sometimes we learn from those we least expect. He who is brave is free. The words, once a comfort, were now a truth lived every day. Emmanuel closed his eyes and whispered a quiet thank you to his mother, to his friends, to the city that had tested and shaped him, and even, in a small way, to Victor Leon. Outside, the bells of Rome tolled midnight, ringing across the city as they had for centuries. Life, Emmanuel realized, was not a matter of victories or defeats, but of perseverance, humility, and the courage to claim your place in the world. He turned up the lights, locking the door behind him, and stepped into the cool night, ready to meet whatever tomorrow would bring. And so, the story of Emmanuel Okoye, the waiter who spoke truth to power, became woven into the tapestry of Rome, a quiet legend carried by the wind. For those who came after, his story was a light in the darkness, a promise that dignity belongs to all, and that even the smallest voice, when lifted with courage, can change the world. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you on the next story.